Hey everyone, so I recently went on vacation to Virginia and I went on another ghost tour while I was there. And I heard some very different and creepy stories that I wanted to share. So, the first thing on the ghost tour that was mentioned was one night when one of the actors from Williamsburg was walking down the street in the evening. There was a man in a U.S. Army uniform standing at the end of the road, except it was a World War I style uniform. Now, the actor who was walking down the street thought that it was just one of her fellow actors. So she was waving to him and saying hello, but she said he looked down and started sobbing. She said the closer that she got to him, the more she felt this incredible crushing grief and this eerie feeling as if something unnatural were going on, as if it was like a warning sign. She stopped in her tracks because she didn't want to get any closer, thinking that something dangerous was going to happen. And the man just vanished. No explanation, no prior warning, just suddenly vanished. And when she ran the heck out of there, and the next day met up with some of her coworkers, there was one person who claimed that the exact same thing had happened to them. She never saw the ghost again, though. One of the exhibits in the colonial homes needed a night guard. There were sometimes kids that were sneaking around on the property and people supposedly trying to break in. So, a retired U.S. Marine was hired to be the night guard. Well, within the first few weeks, nothing much happened. Every night went by without any incidents. And he began to think that people who reported the house as being haunted were just being paranoid or making things up. However, one night, when he was by himself in the house, he said he heard two little children giggling right behind him. Then he heard a loud crash in the basement of the house. He said the laughing creeped him out enough, but when he heard the loud crash in the basement, he was obligated to go check it out. When he got down into the basement, he couldn't see anybody there, and figured that something that was being stored in the basement must have just fallen over, like an old box must have just crashed over. However, when he turned around to go back up the stairs, the basement door slammed, and he heard the lock click. He quickly ran up the stairs and tried to open the door, but he realized he was locked in the basement. He took out his radio and was trying to call for help, but no one was answering. He went back down the stairs to try to look through the basement to see if there was any tool that he could use to get the door open. But when he got to the bottom of the stairs, he felt like his feet were stuck to the floor. Like he couldn't move, and he felt this ominous presence all around him. He kept calling on the radio for help, and finally somebody answered, saying that they would be over to let him out. By the time they got there and opened the door, he was very shaken up. He did some research to try to figure out what it was that had happened to him. Turns out that there was a man who used to live in that house, who way back in the day was a man whose job it was to catch runaway slaves. And when he caught them, he would bring them into the basement and chain their feet to the floor. The next story involved a woman who owned a restaurant. Every night as she was closing up the restaurant, she would go out to her car, look back, and all of the lights would be back on. And every night she would go back inside, turn the lights off again, and relock the door and go back to her car. And this happened every single night, that as soon as she shut the lights off and left, something or someone would turn the lights back on. And one night, as she had just shut off the lights for the second time, locked the door and went to her car, she looked back up in the window and saw a man standing in the window. She went to her car, looked up at the window, and saw a man standing there in an old-fashioned tri-cornered hat. He nodded to her and then vanished. This last story is about a man who was one of the actors in Colonial Williamsburg. And one night, he said he woke up in the middle of the night to strange sounds of someone digging in the backyard. He looked out the window and he said he saw a whole scene of people digging what looked to be graves in the backyard. He panicked because he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know if somebody was trying to destroy the property or trying to break in. So he quickly turned the lights on, looked back out the window, and there was nobody there. When he did some research, he found that there was a cemetery, of unmarked graves on the property because during the Civil War, the death toll in the area was so high that they needed to bury lots of bodies on that property because the local cemeteries ran out of room. Several weeks later, this same man had another ghostly encounter. He said that he was getting ready to go to sleep for the night, and he said that as he was going around the house shutting the lights off, he heard somebody walking behind him. Each time he turned around, there was nobody there. When he went into the living room area, he became frustrated and decided to speak to whatever spirit or entity was bothering him. And he said, "If there is anyone here, I want you to give me a sign." Suddenly, all of the curtains on all the windows flew outwards as if there was a great gust of wind. However, all of the windows were closed. There was no other draft throughout the house, so he didn't know what had caused that other than he believed it was the spirit telling him that it was there. Please let me know what you think of these stories, and feel free to share some of your own.